All right, we've taken a look at how to do state management with TypeScript and off-the-shelf React tools, just the ones baked into React. So let's have a look at how to do it with Redux. And if you're like, whoa, Redux is on the way out. Well, yeah, but I do want to present it here so that folks who are still working on Redux projects have a pretty good idea about how to add TypeScript to their projects to make them even more maintainable. All right, let's just jump right into the code. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to clone the to-do base over in TMP, and I'll call this one to-do Redux. All right, let's bring up VS Code. Okay, let's yarn. Actually, before we start, let's do yarn add Redux and React Redux. Redux is the state managing core, I guess, and then React Redux is how it's going to connect to React using some hooks. So let's add those in there. All right, let's start it on up. Okay, looking pretty good. We've got our top bar that we can use to toggle the dark mode. We got that load button. We got our to-do list, which doesn't have any to-dos in it currently. And then we've got the ability to add a new to-do in, which we're not actually implementing yet. So let's go implement that. All right, so over here, we have a store already, a stored file. So I'm gonna go and actually move this into a directory since there's gonna be multiple files in here. And I'll call that store, and I'll just drop store.ts in there. And the first thing I wanna do is actually come up with some types. Well, we have one already for the to-do. Now I want to go and implement one for, or at least define one for the store. So I'm going to grab this out of here and we'll make a new file called types.ts and then just paste in the to-do. And then let's create a store. So export interface for a store. What are we going to have in there? Well, we're going to have our list of to-dos, and also the new to-do as a string. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So let's go import that over here because we need to pick up the to-do now from there. So how Redux works is you have this store over here, and it's maintained by a reducer function. And that reducer function takes a store and then an action, and it applies the action to the store and returns a new store. For example, in this case, an action might be to add a to-do. And the reducer would go and take the current state of the store, that includes the new to-do, and then it would take that new to-do, set it to an empty string so that it's cleaned, but also add onto the to-dos that new to-do. And we have the code for that over here, at least at the base level. Now we've got to create a reducer that can manage that for us. But before we get there, what we really need to do is create our list of actions and all that. So we're going to create a new file called actions and start defining out what those actions are. So the first thing we need to do is create a bunch of constants that have the different action types. So we'll say export const, and we'll say, well, one of them is add to do. And by convention, they're always uppercased with underscores like that. And there you go. So that would be an example of an action. Now, I've actually got a lot of this implemented already. And to just save us some time, I'm just going to kind of copy and paste in stuff so you don't have to watch me fumble around with all the typing. So let me go and bring in the rest of these. So here are the different action types that we can apply to our reducer and our state. We have the ability to add a to-do, delete a to-do, update a to-do, toggle a to-do, set a new to-do, which would be to set the text of the new to-do item, and then also one to set all of the to-dos, and we'll get to that one when we end up loading from that JSON. So now the next thing we need to do is define the contents of the action. So this is nice as a constant, but an action has two parts. It has the type, which would be like add to do in this case, but it also has a payload, and that payload has any extra information required to implement that particular action. So let's create a new type. We'll call it action type. And we'll say, let's just do one. And we'll say it's a type, or it has a field called type, which is a type of, and then just, for example, add to do. Like that. Pretty cool, right? And for that one, that's actually fine. We don't need a payload in that one. But let's go take a look at one that might need a payload. For example, deleting a to-do needs a payload because you need to identify the index, the item that you actually want to delete. So again, I'm going to bring in a whole bunch of these off the shelf, and we can just kind of walk through those. And we also need to bring in our implementation or definition of to-do. So let's go bring that in. All right, cool. So what are our different action types? So we got set to-dos, which takes a payload of all the to-dos, replacing the ones that are currently there. We have that delete to-do with the index. We've got a update to-do that includes an ID and the text. We've got the toggle, which again takes that number, and then set new to-do takes a string. Cool. All right, yes, but there is still more boilerplate to go, and that's kind of one of the reasons that people don't really like Redux all that much. So to make it easier on ourselves, we also want to export a bunch of action creators. So in this case, for example, export const, we're going to create an add to do, which is a function. Again, it doesn't take any parameters because in the case of an add to do, we don't need that. So we're just going to return then the type of add to do. So, why would you do this? Well, it actually makes a bit more sense if we implement one like, for example, delete to do. That's going to take an ID, number, and then it's going to encode delete to do with a payload with that ID. Just like that. Okay, cool. And then you get a whole bunch of these. So again, to keep us from watching me type, I'm just going to go grab these out, pop these in there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. There's no logic in here at all. This is just a question of formatting these action objects, which then get sent to the reducer. The reducer then applies those to the state, derives a new state, and there you go. So let's save that out, and let's go implement our reducer. So now we've got all that good stuff. Now we need to go and implement a reducer. So let's call this the Redux implementation, because really the reducer is the heart of a Redux system. And again, it's a function, and we'll call it to-do reducer. It's going to take a state, which is the store. So let's go and bring that in from the types. And then by convention, you also need to go and have a default state. So in this case, it's going to have to-dos, where to-dos are empty. And then the new to-do as a string, an empty string. Easy peasy. And then after that, you need an action, which is going to be action types. One of the different actions. All right. So another convention in Redux world is this is implemented with a switch. So we'll have a switch. It's going to switch on the action type. And you need to have a default action. And that default action needs to return the current state of the store. So just return the store, or the state, as it were. Just like that. Okay. But now we need to go and implement a bunch of those actions. So let's just pick one off the shelf. So set to-dos is a good one. And it's going to return a new state. So generally speaking, you just go and destructure state back into a new object. And in this case, all we're going to do is just take to-dos and override that with the action payload, since we just want to go and replace all of the to-dos with a new action payload, or with all the to-dos that are in the payload. Let's try another one. Let's try, for example, delete to-do. And as we can see, it's going importing that up there. So that's how we're getting all that. And again, we need to return. But in this case, we are going to call that local delete to do helper function that we have. And we'll use state.todos as the input. And then it takes an index. So delete to do, oops, hold on, brought it in from actions. It's not actually doing the local delete to do, which is called remove to do. Okay, fine. Okay, there we go. Remove to do. And we'll bring in the payload. Since remove to do takes a list of to-dos and an ID and returns the list of to-dos out. So this is going to delete a to-do for us. But once again, this is a lot of typing and a lot of all that. So I just want to go and kind of bring that in. And then I got to go and bring in these constants. Okay, looking pretty good. So let's have a quick look at all this. So we got this huge switch statement that's got set to-dos. It's going to just replace all the to-dos. It's got setting a new to-do, which is just going to take the initial current state and update the new to-do. It's got update to-do, which is going to go and call that update to-do, toggle to-do, remove to-do, and finally add to-do is just going to set the current new to-do state to an empty string and add the to-do with the original new to-do, which had that original string in it. So the next thing we need to do is actually go and make this into a store. So finally, we get to call Redux. So what we're looking for is create store from Redux. Like that. And now we need to create it. So I'm going to call it store. And I'm going to call create store, and I'm just going to give it the reducer. Call it to do reducer, just like that. Export default on that store. Alrighty, cool. Not bad. So in order to actually get this into our UI, we first need to provide it. So it's a provider-based mechanism. Seen a lot of different state managers. Some have providers, some don't. Redux does. So we'll do provider, and we'll get that from React Redux. And we'll also get the store from the store. And then we'll provide that down the chain. So put that in the top, give it the store. Pop it in there. Okay, looking good. Let's see if we actually are still running. All right. So we need to install the types for React Redux. Fine. Okay, cool. Let's go do that. We'll bring in the types in development mode. Okay, looking pretty good, not blowing up. So that's a plus. Okay, so what do we need to do? Well, we need to go over here to, well, let's take it as an example, to do add, and we are going to go and implement this. We're going to bring in a couple of different things. We're going to bring in use selector and use dispatch from React Redux. So these are hooks. They're handy, they're helpful. You might see in older Redux code a lot of use of connect. That was kind of the old high order component way, the pre-hooks way of getting data from the store into a component. Now the current hotness is to use a selector just like this. So let's take a look. I'm going to go and get out the new to do by saying use selector, and I'll get the state. And then I will extract from the state the new to do. All right, and then I need to get the actual store on that so I can get some strong typing in there. So I'm going to bring in that store type, And I will tell it that the state is a store, and that's going to make it real happy. Okay, cool. And I also need a dispatch because I need to be able to dispatch actions to my store. So let's bring in dispatch and then use dispatch. Okay, so let's take new to do and set that to the value. And then when we do an on change, we're going to get an event. And then we're going to dispatch a set new to do from actions. All right, so that's our little setter there. So what does it take as input? It just happens to take a string. So we'll give it the event target value, and that's going to set that. And then over here in button on click, we're going to go and dispatch another action to our store, and that action is to add to do. Again, over in, let's see, add to do from the actions, just get right one in there, and away you go. That one doesn't take any data, so okay, cool. And let's just try it out. Let's see if this is gonna work. Looks like it's, okay. So it went off to the store, but the problem is that we're not actually displaying anything in our to-do list. So let's go and implement that. Let's go over here, grab a bunch of this stuff. Let's see. Use dispatch and store. We're going to need all that. Let's go over to to-do list, pop it in there, and go over to to-do add. Let's take a look. Okay, cool. But in this case, we want the to-dos, right? And we're going to use that as our array. And we got our store definition. That looks good. And we got our dispatcher. We'll use that when we start actually doing stuff with it. So let's take a look. So in this case, checkbox, we want to do the on click. And we're going to dispatch a toggle to do out of actions with the ID. Pretty clean, I would say. All right, so this has got the value of the to-do text. That's cool. So we need another on change. Again, we'll take the event and we'll dispatch the, what is it? Update to do. Cool. Nope. I want to go get it from the actions. Probably shouldn't have exported from types or from store. So let's go and actually remove the exports on these because I don't think we need them. Cool. Okay, great. All right. And update to do. What does an update to do take? Well, it takes a number, which would be the ID, and takes a string. So that'd be the event target value. Cool. And then finally, the on click for an delete, which is going to be another dispatch with a delete or remove. Is it remove this time? Remove to do. That's what it was. Wait, hold on. Maybe it's delete to do. Which one is it? Oh, there we go. It's delete to do. Remove, delete, I don't know. So let's see. All right, bringing that to do ID. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's take a look at over our UI. And we'll go and add. Oh, this is looking good. Nice. Okay, cool. So we can delete it. We can add another one, add some more, toggle them. Yeah, all right. Looking pretty good. Okay, so this is actually sending through our reducer, all of that. This is actually, it's working pretty good. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is implement this load functionality over here. Again, that goes off to this JSON payload right here. It just has a nice, bunch of to-dos, get the dinner fixins, cook dinner, eat dinner, all that. And I want to show you how to load asynchronously and handle that in a Redux store. So let's go back over to our console. And to get this happening, you could do all kinds of stuff with this. You don't have to go this far with it, but traditionally you use a thunk for this. So we're going to add a Redux Thunk. And I'm going to add in a couple of things. I'm going to do this apply middleware from Redux. And then I'm going to bring in Redux Thunk. And then down in here at the create store, I'm going to do this apply middleware and then give it thunk. Now, middleware is just stuff that can alter or manage actions before or after they occur. So in this case, that's what's giving you that ability to optionally return a function out of a dispatched action that would allow you then to go and do that asynchronous behavior. So that needs to be in there as well. Let's go make sure that everything's still working. Probably need to start the server to see that happen. Okay, seems to be happy. Everything's still working, and that's just because regular dispatches work just fine. It's this kind of special case where you are returning a function that in turn gets you the data or whatever you got. So let me just go bring in the implementation of that. So I'll go over here to actions. I'm going to create a new function called getToDos. Fun, right? So let me just go and fix a bunch of these things. Okay, so getToDo takes a URL and it returns a thunked action, which has that string. That in turn takes a dispatch. This is an asynchronous function. We then fetch that URL. We get back the response. We then get the list of to-dos by looking at the JSON response of that. And then we finally dispatch that set to-dos, which is what we saw back up here. Set to-dos right there. And that's the synchronous version. So basically, the asynchronous part is right here where we go off and get the data. And then finally, once we're done, then we synchronously dispatch the set to-dos. Okay. Cool. But where do we actually use this? I think we use this over in top bar. So let's go and import that. Well, first we need to bring in the dispatcher, right? So let's go here and bring in a dispatcher and then bring in dispatcher from React Redux. Easy peasy. Not really, but whatever. It's good to know that we can do this stuff. And then I need to, let's see. Oh, hold on. I need to actually do this on the load. So I'm going to go over here to onClick. And then I'm going to dispatch the get to-dos that we just created. And then give it that URL. Copy and paste that. Save it so we can actually see it and it looks nice. Yeah, there we go. So the click dispatches get to-dos. And that then goes and does the fetch, gets a JSON response, and then it dispatches again and calls set to-dos with that. So let's give it a try. Let's see if that actually works. All right. Load. Hey, wow. Worked first time. Okay, cool. We're done. But wow, there's a lot to look at, right? So let's start with the types. So we've got our to-do that we had before. No problem. And we then strongly type the store, which is nice. So if we wanted to go and change, for example, to to-do list, like that, now we can start to see, oops, whoa, okay, so there's all these problems. So we're getting our strongly typed behavior out of TypeScript, which is great, which is what you want. Actually, it's working clean right now. That's great too. Let's go over here to store. So store is, well, we've got our original stuff from before. So we've got all of our helper functions and all that. We're bringing in the types. But we're also bringing in this thunking middleware and the store creator, as well as all the definitions of all the actions. So again, all those actions are nicely, strongly typed as well. So I can go and change, if I go and change add to do to add, set to dos now, right? We can start to see that we get TypeScripting issues wherever we use that. So that's really good too. Okay. All right. And then we've got our action creators, all of which are nicely, strongly typed. We've got our get to-dos, which is very strongly typed. That's the thunked asynchronous action. And that shows you how to do that one. And then finally, so once we got all that done, we create our reducer. Our reducer takes an initial state, which has just an empty set of to-dos and a new to-do. It takes an action defined by action types. There's a big old switch statement that actually manages all that state. And then finally, we create the store with the reducer and apply the middleware. Okay, now the really cool thing I would say about this is that this reducer pattern now is actually baked into React itself. It's called use reducer, and it takes almost this exact same API surface. The only difference is that in the case of use reducer, you actually don't just return the state. In the case of a default, you actually throw a new error. Not a big difference, but it's kind of nice to know that you really don't actually have to use Redux itself directly. You can use reducer, and then if you want asynchronous behavior, you can just accomplish that through use effects. So you can use those together and perhaps create like a custom hook if you want to do that, and get that all together and working using use reducer, use effect to do stuff asynchronously, use callback if you want to do that. So a bunch of tools that you can use to kind of create a custom hook that gives you that state management functionality. As with all of these videos, all of this code is available to you on GitHub. Check it out. Okay, I hope you enjoyed learning about Redux in this to-do example. Let's talk about some pros and cons of using Redux in 2021. And we'll start with the pros. It's really small. As you've seen it, Redux is about 8K, so that's actually competitively small with the newer state managers. It's also, admittedly, an industry standard. I mean, who hasn't heard the terms React Redux? And for years we've been hiring for React Redux, and for sure that's a thing. There's a lot of folks out there that know it, and that's something you should definitely consider. It's also really hard to get your data into a bad state with Redux. It's a unidirectional data flow. It's very strongly managed and typed, and that makes it very difficult to get your data into a bad state. There's also great developer tools and a great ecosystem around Redux. So those are some big pros on the side of Redux. Now let's talk about some cons. At this point, it's largely redundant. We have use reducer, and that's baked into the ecosystem. So you really actually don't need it. It can also be complex in older systems using stuff like connect instead of the hooks. It can be complex to reason about, particularly if you've got functions, returning functions, needing to get called by other functions. I think the signature of middleware is particularly complex. And things that layer on top of Redux can actually make it even more complex, like Redux sagas can be very difficult to reason about. But if you're willing to take that on, then maybe Redux is the state manager for you, even in 2021. But I want to hear from you, get your thoughts on this, and see where you're at with it. So be sure to leave that down in the comments section down below, or jump on the Discord server and talk to us directly about it. But in the meantime, of course, feel free to like and share this video with your friends. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And of course, be happy, be healthy, and be safe.